There was a time when deep half guard felt like a cheat code, but now you barely see it anymore at the highest levels in jiu-jitsu. So what changed? Did deep half guard just fall out of fashion? Or did we just realize how weak the position really is? Personally, I used to rely on deep half guard as a big part of my game, until it started to break down more and more often against opponents with better balance and good counters to the position. In this video, we'll break down how the deep half guard actually works, why it's so risky in today's meta, and go into detail breaking down the ways it's shut down. And we'll talk about the one person who never gave up on it and made deep half work at the highest level, even when everyone knew it was coming, maybe proving it doesn't suck after all. And if you don't already know me, my name's Sean. I'm a BJJ black belt, software engineer, coach at Renzo Gracie Brooklyn, and a founder of Digitsu. I have a newsletter where I go deeper into the topics in my videos. And if you sign up, I'll send you free instructional content from grapplers like Mason Fowler, Eddie Cummings, Jason Rao, and more. If you're interested, you can go to digitsu.com/SeanABJJ, and you'll also find a sign-up link down in the description. Now with that out of the way, let's get started. So recently, I saw some people on social media talking about obsolete or old person guards, and yeah, deep half guard came up. And this was the most upvoted reply on Reddit.
You don't see deep half? You obviously must be under 35.
But I'm not kidding. A few years ago, someone even said to me in training, "Wow, you play deep half? I didn't realize you were that old." But it wasn't always like this. Before we get into some of the problems with deep half guard and how to counter it, let me tell you about the time when, for me, deep half guard felt like magic. Back when I was a blue belt, before I even played deep half, my game relied on an underhook from half guard. My go-to move is to pull half guard, make sure I'm on my side, make sure I'm blocking the crossface, keeping my other arm tight to my body, working a deep underhook, and then I'd get the kind of sweeps where I'd wrestle up and get on top. In fact, my first jiu-jitsu tournament was the beginner division at Naga in 2005, and I swept every single opponent with this exact sequence, earning a silver medal. Back then, the half guard wasn't developed as much, especially here in the US at the beginner level. Like in general, people at that level at that time weren't particularly good at shutting down half guard or countering the underhook. So often what I would do, I would get that half guard, get on my side. They would overcommit, and I'd keep my arm tight to my body, giving me a nice deep underhook. But that started to change real fast, and I found myself struggling more and more to make that sweep work. So over the next few years, I started experimenting with a new form of half guard, and that was deep half. And I honestly don't remember exactly where I first learned about this position. This was the early YouTube era, but I do remember Jon Calestine putting out some of the first videos I saw on the position. To be fair, the origins of deep half go back way further in competition, especially in Brazil, but the evolution of jiu-jitsu was way slower back then. Streaming didn't exist. If you wanted to watch an instructional or a tournament, DVDs were the only option. So one of my main training partners at the time, Christian, was also interested in the position. You know, we would often drill, brainstorm sequences, and troubleshoot the deep half together. And it wasn't long before we both started getting ridiculously easy sweeps in training. Then I remember Jeff Glover's deep half instructional came out on Budo Videos around 2009. And it was a total game changer for me. And honestly, watching some of it today for this video, it still holds up today. So there are a bunch of deep half variations out there, some where you hook under the far hip, others that use lapel grips, but it was the Jeff Glover style where you go completely underneath the trap leg that I gravitated towards. And I even got to attend a seminar with him the following year where I asked him some of the questions about the problems I was running into in training, and took things even further. This was the golden age of deep half for me. I remember feeling like I could sweep anyone from this position. Of course, I didn't realize then just how much this would eventually change. But in the meantime, my game revolved around using framing from knee shield or the standard half guard base I'd already developed. Instead of shooting for an underhook, I'd dive underneath with my other arm between their legs. My go-to was the Homer Simpson sweep. I would stay tight, walk their knee toward the other knee, then open it up and come on top. Oftentimes, just by entering deep half, they would drop back to their hip to look for attacks or just lose their balance. And then that'd give me space for an easy sweep where I'd just roll over and get on top. As long as I kept their leg trapped, I was safe from triangles and other attacks. Then if they went the other way and based their hands out in front of them, that opened up opportunities then to attack the back. And one of the biggest strengths of deep half was just how easy it was to enter into, especially when escaping bad positions. You could just trap the ankle from mount and shoot underneath, or when escaping the back, keep the leg trapped between your legs and then turn directly underneath into deep half. And it was around this time at Purple Belt I started to get a reputation at my gym for my deep half guard. But like most techniques in jiu-jitsu, what once felt like a cheat code, people started to get comfortable defending and the position started to show its limits. Like I remember training with my professor at the time, Matt Sarah, and I was trying my hardest to hit the deep half on him. The thing was, I would get the position, but then he would just balance on top of me like a cat every single time. Often he would stuff my head, stepping over, and then smash my guard like it was nothing. And around the same time, I went to a seminar taught by Cobrinha, and I was lucky enough to have a roll with him. And it was the same story. I would get deep half, I would get all my grips, but no sweat on his part. He would stand his toes, stuff my head, balance perfectly, and pass with no issue. Now, don't get me wrong, I was a purple belt, and I wasn't completely delusional that I can hang with these guys. Like, these were some of the best grapplers at this time. So, of course, I shouldn't have expected I would be able to sweep them, but things didn't just stop there. I started having a harder and harder time with one of my main training partners at the time, Joey Beans. He was getting really good at staying balanced and attacking the underhook when I was playing deep half. Then came a match at one of the early no-gi pans in New York City. My first round opponent was the late Oliver Geddes. I pulled half guard, got to deep half, but I just couldn't sweep him. He eventually got an underhook under my arm, and then he was able to use that to set up a kimura triangle on me and get the tap. Then at Worlds in 2010, I went for deep half from knee shield, and I immediately ate a brutal crossface, got my guard passed, and never fully recovered. So I tried to adjust. I worked really hard on preventing them from getting the underhook, staying on my side, keeping them off balance, preventing the crossface, but still I continued to struggle and this trend continued. I had a finals match at a Good Fight tournament against Gary Tonin, and despite getting half guard throughout most of the match, I could not sweep him at all. And this pattern of me having less and less success from the position continued into training as well. One training partner in particular of mine at the time, Stevie Stones, who was a wrestler, blue belt, had great base, super mobile, gave me so much trouble. He'd stay light on his toes, it was really hard to knock off his base, and if it became some sort of wrestling scramble, I could not take him down. I would spend entire rounds stuck in deep half, fending off underhooks, crossfaces, stiff arms, failing sweep after sweep. And honestly, the position started to become less and less fun. At first, I thought the problem was me. Like I just need to train harder, get stronger, figure out some tricks, improve my timing. But the more I got stuck in training and in competition, especially against people who I thought I should have been able to sweep, the more I started to realize maybe there's something fundamentally flawed about deep half guard. Now let's get into some of the main problems with deep half guard and how it's countered. So one of the major problems with deep half guard is that when you're playing it, no matter which variation, your arms are committed to their legs and their hips. And that means you don't have your hands available to block cross faces, stiff arms, or any kind of upper body control they can get. Your only real defense here is staying tight, keeping your opponent off balance, trying to threaten with sweeps. But if they're able to stabilize, regain their balance, keep their toes active on the mat, then the position can quickly unravel. And one of the more common things people will do to pass deep half from here, once they have their balance, they're on their toes, they stiff arm the head, then they can step over because they create some space here. They create some separation, and then they can step over, they can go for the pass or go back around. And once you get to this position, you're out of deep half. Bruno likes to use his leg here and his hand to free his leg and then come back around to north-south. And another way to finish this pass here, we have Lucas Lepre on top. He's going to show that you can get this arm through, and as you step over, rather than going the north-south, if you go back around, it becomes an underhook, so you can go into a knee slice pass, or at least a more dominant form of half guard. And another really common way to pass deep half, instead of sliding over this way, you could bring the knee to the mat here and slide your hip over. Personally, I didn't have to deal with this one too much, I think, because I would play the Jeff Glover style where my shoulder would be more under this leg, but I've used it successfully, especially when they're hugging the hip here really tight. And we have Dan Koval here on top, and he's going to show another major problem deep half. If your opponent is able to get an underhook or separate this arm from your body here, you can quickly find yourself being caught in kimuras, triangles, and arm locks. So we have another example here of another way you can be attacked from Edwin Najimi. So even if they don't get an underhook here with their right arm inside, if they can bring their other arm underneath your armpit, then the only thing preventing you from being triangled is keeping their leg trapped between your legs. And this is true even when you come on top and go for a sweep. And in the gi, you don't just have to worry about your arms here. You know, you can hide your arm underneath the leg, so it's hard for them to get an underhook. But man, if they just get one lapel grip right here, you're one step away from being bow and arrow choked. So another issue I have with deep half is that you could be doing everything right. You could be hiding your arm from the underhook. You could be staying tight. You can be keeping their leg trapped. But occasionally you're just going to run into someone who has really good balance, who's flexible, and knows to stay on their toes. Now, don't get me wrong. This is true of every form of guard. If you run into an opponent who has spent a lot of time defending in that guard and they have good balance and flexibility, it can be really difficult to sweep them. But I just feel like in deep half in particular, if the opponent isn't giving you any of the easy mistakes, you're not really controlling distance as much as opposed to something like X guard where you can really use your legs, get underneath them, and disrupt their balance. My next problem with deep half is actually my main reason for moving away from the position. And that's the wear and tear in my body it's given me over years of playing the position, specifically my neck. Now think about it, you're constantly dealing with cross faces, which is true of regular half guard, but now with our hands underneath, we're dealing with people pushing on our head, sitting on our face. And I hurt my neck pretty bad one time when someone went for the basic step over pass, but this stretched my neck and gave me a few impingements, which is something I talked more about in another video. And that's not even to mention, just the superficial stuff that can happen to your ears and face when you're playing deep half all the time. There's also a deeper issue with relying heavily on deep half guard that I think many people miss. Once you start to build your entire game around deep half, you develop habits that move you away from more conventional and fundamental jiu-jitsu. From half guard, your game is no longer built around staying on your side facing your opponent. You stop relying as heavily on building strong frames and controlling distance. Instead, you rely on diving on your opponents when you feel pressure. Now, don't get me wrong, these reasons are part of the success of deep half guard because it's a little surprising and unorthodox. But if you're not careful over time, you can lose other parts of your guard game if you're just spamming deep half all the time, which is what happened to me. And finally, the last problem I'll mention when playing deep half, which I alluded to earlier, is that the line between a good position and a bad position is very thin. Like 1 second, you're off balancing them, setting up a sweep, and then the next second, your guard's getting passed, or worse, you're caught in a submission. And that's exactly what started happening to me more and more often over and over again. And as I actively tried to change my game, moving away from the position, I noticed something interesting. I wasn't alone. All right, so I know what some of you are probably thinking, probably something like, deep half guard doesn't suck. You just suck at it. And hey, maybe that's fair. Like I could talk about my butterfly guard and how it gets countered and passed sometimes, and then show some techniques on how to pass butterfly guard and say, hey, that position sucks. Meanwhile, Adam Orzinski is out there wrecking people at the highest levels with his butterfly guard. But here's the thing. Over the years, I've noticed a trend of very high level grapplers going through a very similar cycle I did. Like not long ago, I went to a seminar with Celcinho, super accomplished competitor, known specifically for his deep half guard game. At the seminar, he taught a whole series on half guard, and he didn't even show deep half. Instead, he straight up said that over the years, especially as he's gotten older, it's just not fun to play deep half anymore. The cross faces, the pressure, he admitted he doesn't use it really in his game anymore. Even Marcelo Garcia played deep half guard in his earlier days, and he had some success with it. But as time went on, it basically vanished completely from his game. You can even see him struggling to make it work in certain matches, like his match versus Jacare. So while deep half can work and has worked at the highest levels, I've seen this pattern too many times to ignore. People use it for a while, build systems around it, and then they start to phase it out, often citing some of the same issues we went over: the inability to control distance, the exposure to attacks, and the brutal grind of playing underneath. But there's at least one exception. One grappler who didn't just keep using deep half, he built his entire game around it and reached the pinnacle of the sport. I would argue that Bernardo Faria is the most successful deep half guard player of all time. He's a 5-time IBJJF world champion at black belt, and deep half guard was the core part of his game. He would immediately pull directly into it early in matches, using it to sweep to get on top, where you could immediately transition into his over-under passing, another signature of his game. And the thing about this, everyone knew it was coming. Jiu-jitsu can feel easy when you catch your opponents off guard, when they don't know what's coming, and you have the element of surprise. But it gets a lot harder when your opponents are prepared, experienced, and trained to shut down your exact game. That's what makes Bernardo's success that much more impressive to me. And while he did struggle against some opponents, including Hadra Gracie, he never gave up on the position. In fact, he used it to win double gold at both the Pans and the Worlds in 2015. And maybe there's a lesson here. Sometimes success in jiu-jitsu isn't about surprise and innovation, but it's about persistence. Bernardo didn't abandon the deep half when it got shut down. He didn't jump ship when it got uncomfortable. He doubled down on the details and made it his position. And sometimes the best game is the game you made peace with, even if it hurts a little. Because the truth is, jiu-jitsu often rewards going very deep on just a few techniques. Like, you don't need 1,000 different types of guards to play or ways to pass guard. You just need a few you can do really well consistently under pressure. So maybe that's the takeaway. If you're going to suffer through stiff arms and cross faces, make sure it's something you've decided is worth it. So yeah, maybe deep half isn't the most comfortable guard to play, but maybe with enough grit and determination, it can take you all the way. So with all that being said, where do I stand now? Do I think deep half guard really sucks? Do I never use it anymore? Well, I actually stopped playing it completely for a while. And honestly, that was really tough. My entire game felt disconnected without it because I completely relied on it. But recently, I started bringing it back just with a new approach. When I go for it now, I make sure to treat it like a very active position and I don't hang out there. Like, it's not the main position I go for, but when I'm there, I make sure to protect my neck. I keep my neck muscles engaged and I immediately try to go to one of the sweeps, or what I often like to do is try to use it to transition back to something like single leg X or a more traditional style half guard. And I'm finding it most useful not as a guard I try to pull. Like, for instance, I won't give up a regular half guard or knee shield to go to deep half, but rather when I'm escaping from positions like mount, where if I'm having trouble doing an elbow escape either to single leg X or back to half guard, I find sometimes if I trap the ankle, I can go right to deep half. And the same is also true when someone's on my back. So then I'll use deep half as a position to transition to different guards. And every now and then I might run into someone in training who just hasn't been exposed to the position that much. And then I find I can get these super easy, clean sweeps just because they're not used to countering it. Like a lot of jiu-jitsu, things come into and out of the meta, and often techniques work not necessarily just because they're superior, but because your opponent just hasn't built the same defenses and reactions that you built on offense. So does deep half guard suck? Not exactly, but if you're gonna play it, you better know what you're signing up for. Anyway, that's all I have for today. Thank you for watching.